It's time for the next car in our road test series, and this is going to be a biggie. This is a special car. I don't think we've ever had a car in the workshop that has generated so much interest. When clients and you guys have come into the workshop and seen this car, you've walked straight past the other exotica we've had here, whether it's F40s or 4Cams or Lusos, all the big cars. Is that what I think it is? Is it a real one? So welcome to the world of the Metro 6R4. Yes, it is a real one. We've spoken about this before. It is the McRae car. It's been with us for about 5 months now. It's taken us to get this car right. So go and get yourself a cup of coffee, press pause, have a sit down, and we're going to enjoy this car and go through what we've done to it. To give you a sort of quick background, let's go back to the 80s and look at why this car is so special and why it is so quick, of why it is so capable of what it does. Back then, manufacturers were using racing and motorsport to promote their brand. So you had all the Lotus Cortinas, and it was a coloration that worked very well. Then they came to a point where the governing body relaxed the regulations. Up until then, it had been quite restrictive. So they almost threw the rule book away, and the manufacturers almost had a clean sort of blank piece of paper to go and do whatever they wanted to do. And they called it Group B, and it sat in a class of its own. So what they did, it almost gave the engineers a chance to go completely mad. Now, whilst this came out of, it was a collaboration between Austin Rover and Williams Formula One that built this thing. So yes, there are a few Metro bits on it. I think mainly the headlights, the badge on the middle of the radiator, middle of the grille. I think the backlights and probably the wiper stalk are about the only thing that's Metro on this. All the rest is purpose built, very purposeful. So it vaguely resembles a Metro. And it's a bit like if you look at the other cars in this series, you had, obviously Austin Rover did the Metro, Peugeot did the T16 Peugeot, which loosely looked like a 205. Ford did the RS200, which was a completely unique car with a Ford badge on it. Obviously the Audi Quattros, but it was the technology that went into these cars that ultimately became its demise, because these things were so fast and so quick. They ended up banning the series because it was too dangerous. So, but what you get now is you can buy these things. These cars are available, and you get absolutely cutting-edge technology from the 80s, from the best they had at the time, that you can now have and drive on the road. One of the regulations for rally cars is they're all road legal, because you had to drive on the public highway between the stages. So this is a road legal monster. So they're quite, you don't need to go and hire a test track to drive these things. It's got an MOT, it's got a logbook, you can drive it on the road. For these cars to counter sort of production cars, so to speak, by the manufacturer, so by Audi, Peugeot, Austin Rover, you couldn't just make sort of 5 cars that were super trick to go racing in. So you had to make 200. So they made 200 of these, and that was the amount you needed for the class. This is number 152, this car. So this came out of Longbridge, so to speak. There was a special team put together for assembling these cars. It then ended up, it was modified for Colin McRae. So this is the Colin McRae car that he raced. It's the Donegal car. You can see it on YouTube. He campaigned it on numerous events. Whilst he was taking part in the World Rally Championship, he came back to play with this sort of thing. So it's got some very trick bits on it. So they all come out of Longbridge in Clubman spec, and then various teams got hold of them and put them back to work spec. So this has got all the trick bits on that the works cars had. So all in all, this makes this a very special car, and this is what sort of stirred people's emotions when they've come into the workshop and gone, crikey, is that a 6R4 Metro? It's not just a 6R4 Metro, it's one of the ones that Colin McRae drove, so it's the it ticks all the boxes. We've got all the history with the car. You can see it's still got his name on the side, it's got the original seats. It's all over YouTube where he's driven it. So it's a real piece of history. It's a special car that not only has it got all the trick bits to make it go well, it's also got the history that ticks all the boxes as well. So it's quite unique, and it's a privilege to be involved with this project. Sadly, when Colin passed away, the car was passed on to another owner, and he campaigned it for a while, and it still got used. Then one of our owners bought the car, and it sort of fell into disrepute. It hadn't been used a lot. we had a look at it. It was almost impossible to drive. You had like 2 goes to get it going, starting it from cold. It wouldn't start from hot. The engine was very jerky. It was almost impossible. I mean, it's highly strung anyway, but it just wasn't usable. So it ended up just being laid up for a couple of years because it was undrivable. So what happened is John, the owner, came to us and said, right, let's sort this thing out. Let's make it work. Let's get this car back to its heyday. And you all know me. You know, I was involved with rallying back in the 80s, so it's been a real sort of privilege to get on this. So it's been here for about 5 months now, through lockdown and everything. And we've been working on it. Getting information has been particularly hard, so thank you to the sort of 6R4 fraternity for helping us out on this, because you know, it is quite special. There's no manuals for these cars, so it's all been done on sort of gut feeling and just experience. So we've had the engine out, we've gone through the cam timing, the throttle bodies. As you can see, there's a whole series of videos that we've put together, culminating in this one today, that what we've been up to in the last sort of 4 or 5 months. But basically, it is all now back together, and it runs and it works, and it is, I must say, they say never drive your heroes, but crikey, this thing doesn't disappoint at all. One of the things I've made reference to before is that the engine's sort of mid-engine in this, but it's actually almost in the cockpit with you. This is the loudest car I've ever been in. I think anyone else will ever like to go in, ever. It is absolutely ear-piercing. To try and put that into perspective, we ran it the other day and went out and sort of did some shakedown miles in it. It came to the evening, I thought, right, I'll go out in it again and put some more miles on it. And I was in it for probably half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. When I came back, my ears were ringing and almost hurting, like you've been to a sort of nightclub. And I got up the next morning and my ears were still hurting. I was thinking, oh crikey, I hope I haven't sort of damaged my hearing to the point where I couldn't have got in this car again the next day of worrying about, no, it is that loud. So luckily, the owner, it's got all the original intercom, it's got the headset, so we got the headsets brought down. You can communicate with whoever's sitting next to you, because it's just so loud, you just can't, you just laugh all the time, you can't do anything. So this makes life a little bit more civilised, and it is, protects your ears. Regarding the engine, these used to run up to about 12.5, 13,000 RPM back in the day. We've got this set to a rev limiter of 9.5, mainly just to protect the engine. There's not much you can do at 12,500 revs that you haven't already done at 9.5. So, as I said, this thing's quite historically significant. It's got the original engine in it. It's got all the original bits in it, all the old stuff. It's quite a historical object, so we don't want to break it. It's got the crash gearbox, which is a bit of an acquired taste, as the video shows how the gears select. So there is a bit of a knack to driving these. When you're got on the ups change going up, flat out, it's perfect. It just goes bang, 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 and coming down. But if you drive it on normal roads, you have to sort of get the timing right. So it is a bit of a handful to drive. Now we're recommissioning this car. It's been laid up in a private collection for a few years. We've got the engine out, we've got the suspension off, get the brakes going. Really pleased to be out displaying this car next year. Looking forward to meeting Jimmy and Alistair and celebrating Colin's achievements. Together with this car, it's got a lovely history. It's got notes from when Colin and Nicky Grist did the Donegal Rally. For those of you on YouTube, you can see this car well in action with Colin. Had a very big moment on the Donegal Rally. There's all the notes here, all the notes they made for the rally. There's bits of the car, all this technical spec. Colin signed all the paperwork. There's original signatures of him when he got the car. So it's a really cool car, this, with all the bits and pieces that go with it. When we get this back and running, we'll obviously do some video, because these are brilliant cars to go, unbelievable cars to go out in. The noise is incredible. Okay, so here we are around the business end of the 6R4. It's not often you get this close to one and to see one apart with the engine out. This one is a full Group B spec. It was the 410 horsepower full fat Metro. After they got banned, they had to sleeve them down and reduce the CC. for clubman spec. This car's also got some little tricks that Colin had put on the car. It's got rotating throttle bodies, bits and pieces, some quite clever stuff on this that I'll go through with you at a later date, but it's really cool. Engine's all good, it's all been dynoed. Basically, it just had a few oil leaks where it had been standing unused for a while, so we're just sorting those out. You can see we've dropped the whole rear transfer casing out, so you've got the diff that comes out of here and that shaft goes through that hole at the front. So coming down here you've got the two easier to transfer gears that you can obviously change your ratios, and then you've got this big helical clutch arrangement on the back here, so all that goes in the back of that. This is basically your centre helical clutch. Now the bit that's coming out the front is this is the little shaft, and what we've got is it's the play and the splines. These splines here, you can just see I've got a little bit of wear in them, and by the time that gets out to where the oil seal runs, you've got a bearing that runs on here which is fine, but it's that movement there which is wearing the splines, which is why that seal runs out. And if you come up and look at the front's the same. They've got all the shaft out. Basically, you can see that shaft moving up and down. When you take it out, it's all just the splines again. And when it's amplified there, and it goes on that seal. So these little 3-inch shafts that you've got down here, you've got one of those each end, plus you've got a joint there, so you've got a bit of movement there. Then you've got those little adapter bits, so you've got 4 joints and worn splines. Okay, looking here, we've got the racing dog type box, which is different to the synchro box. I'll try and show you how it works. Basically, you can see here that the pegs in the middle just line up with the pegs on the gears. So you sit in the middle there in neutral, and you literally just crash that into there by force and hope the slots line up. It's a lot more robust, it's a lot more noisy, it's a bit more brutal, but for competition use. You'll also notice that these have got the straight cut gears as opposed to the helical gears, which are cut at an angle, so these are much louder. A bit more brutal, but that's how it works. Literally just crash, crash, next gear, bang, bang, and that's it. The engine's back in now. From the photos that you've seen of the story so far, as you know, this car had been laid up for a long time and had a few oil leaks. So we've had the engine out, we've had all the casings off, the sump off, sealed everything back up again. We've redone all the diffs and the gearbox, so everything's been resealed. And it's now going back together. So we're sort of part way through. As you can see on the floor, there's still a lot of bits to go. One of the things that's been quite nice about this car, and quite quirky, there's a difference with factory works cars. It's all about just making it work. There's no compromise. Things like these exhausts, I mean, they're just enormous. The fundamentals of an engine is you get the gas in and out as quick as possible. When you've got manifolds like this, they're certainly going to go out quick enough. On the intake side, and this is mind-blowing on this car, not only have we got some very trick throttle bodies on the top of the engine here, we've got rotating barrel throttle bodies that open right up. They clearly didn't think that was enough, so they stuck an entire set of second injectors on the top, a bit like the F40s run. So you've got all this intake system on the top with standoff pipes and everything. So this really is about getting air in, through the engine, out as quick as possible, which basically equates to power. Something else that is really quirky on this car that does your head in while you're working on it. British Leyland were obviously, for those of you who know, are on imperial size nuts, bolts and what have you. So everything is imperial. So we've got 1/2-inch threads and UNF and UNC threads. After that, some of the engine stuff and some of the other racing stuff that's gone on is all metric. So you're constantly grabbing spanners. Half the car's in old money, in inches, and half the cars in metric. We're very much metric here. You know, all the Ferrari stuff is all metric, so we're all geared up for coarse, fine metric. Might generally use metric spanners. Here, every time you pick something up, you don't know whether it's an original bit or a racing bit or somewhere in between. It's just been interesting. We've used spanners we haven't used for a while. As you know, we've won a lot of concours awards all around the world, and we're very much known for clean and tidy and getting it absolutely perfect. On this one, it's a bit of a change of tack. The value and the authenticity of the car is all in keeping it dirty. So we've got little holes in the carbon, marks on oil pipes. We've left all that original. The nice thing about this car is it is original. It hasn't been restored. So putting it back almost a little bit grubby and a little bit dirty is what we've got to do. It just goes against the grain of what we naturally do here at Barkaways. So just looking inside the Metro, it's fairly cramped in here. As you can see, we've got roll cages, seats, harnesses. One of the well-known things about the Metros is they are probably the loudest car that most people have been in. I mean, it's certainly the loudest I've ever driven, and the guys that have rallied these have all said they're the loudest rally car. Rally cars are noisy anyway because you don't get any soundproofing and what have you. One of the reasons these are so loud is the engine. There's mid-engine cars and there's in the cabin with you engine cars, and I'd describe this as it's not mid-engine, it's here. There's only a tin shield that goes underneath this, and you can see the engine's there, the gearbox is here, it's in the car with you, which is one of the reasons this is so loud. We're going to crack on now, get the rest of this thing together, put all the bits back on the car. We'll obviously, when we do get it running, we're going to remap all the early 1980s Pectel system. So we're going to go through all that. We've got an old laptop and all the old stuff that stays with this car. One of the problems with running the old systems is there's just not the software to run these cars. It's a bit like needing an old Nokia phone. So we've got the old laptop and all the old program for this, so we can set it all up again. Suspension's all been done. Thanks to the guys at Proflex, sorted that out for us. All the shock absorber spheres have all been regassed with nitrogen and everything, so we can rebuild all the suspension, get that back on. We can obviously do all the corner weights and reset all the geometry to get this car ready for displaying this year. Okay, so here we are. It's taken us about 4 months to get to this point. We're ready to try and fire this thing up again. As I said, it's had some quite major surgery and refurbishment. You all know I love a car that has a bit of a process before we start it. This one's got a lot of process. There's lots of switches and buttons and all sorts that need doing. One of the things you do on these is you hand prime the oil pump. So I'm just going to show you how you do that. Okay, so to talk you through the oil system on this car. What's known as a dry sump system. So the oil's kept out of the sump, which is why the sump's called dry sump. So it's kept in this oil tank here. So the oil's passed through the engine, through a pump that's belt driven on the side, through the engine, through the camshafts, drips to the bottom. Then there's a scavenge pump in the bottom of the engine that sucks the oil back out, blows it back into this tank via 2 oil coolers, so it gets cooled on the way back, comes through this tank. It also swirls around, gets rid of all the air and foam in the oil. Then it's taken back round to the pump, pumped through the filter and back round again. So it's a complete circulating system. Most race cars use this sort of system. It keeps the oil separate, gives it a chance to cool down, gives it a longer route to go through. It also minimises surge. On a wet sump engine, if you've got all the oil retained in the sump, on hard cornering and flinging around, there is a chance the pickup might suck air and you get cavitation, whereas when it's all held in a tank, you're pretty much guaranteed oil pressure all the time. So what we've got to do is take the belt off. There's a belt-driven pump, a tooth belt, we'll show you. Take that off, turn the oil pump by hand to prime all the circuits. You see they're quite heavy pipes, we go through all the coolers, all the primaries, all the filters, fill the whole lot up, so when the engine fires, it's got oil pressure straight away. So what we've done on here, you can see down here, there's the belt-driven oil pump. So we've taken the little tooth belt off. We've developed a system. Basically, we've got a socket shaft. We've made a gap between the exhaust, so we can go through here. Little battery drill. So now we can turn that by hand, and you can hear a bit of gurgling and stuff going on. And you can feel a bit of resistance starting, so it's starting to build pressure. I can feel it gurgling through the filter because this system's completely bone dry, as you say, it's all been apart. It's a lot better to do it like this than risk spinning the engine over with no oil in it. I can feel it all burping through now, there's some gurgling going on. Here we are inside the car. You can see the oil light and the oil gauge. So if Ben puts the ignition on and fires up that, if I prime the pump, the light should go out and the gauge should read. What have we got, Ben?
4 bar.
4 bar. And as we stop, the oil pressure drops and the light comes back on. So not only do we know we've got oil pressure, we also know that the warning system works. So on most race cars you get a gauge, but just in case you're missing the gauge when there's lots going on, you usually have a big orange light that comes up in front of the driver. Okay, so the next thing to do, we've done the oil, we've got the electrics, so he's run the fuel system next, make sure we've got no leaks. Again, it's been dry for a few months, so if you fire up the pumps, Ben, and again you can hear them buzzing, gurgling a bit as it self-bleeds the system. It's just going around the unions, making sure we've got no leakage anywhere. No big leaks, so we're looking good. Okay, so it's moment of truth time. We've got to push the button. Exciting stuff, so we give it a bit of a help. So if I just give it a little bit of this. Right, go on then, Ben. I must say, I'm amazed. People always say, you know, do these things start up? So we've shared this as a video with you, and yes, it did just go like that. Brilliant. Credit to the team and the work we do here. Something else we've done on this to help it start, it now runs a 24-volt starting system. So what that means, we've got one battery up the front that runs all the car electrics for 12 volts, and there's another battery that we've located. This actually it's got twin fuel cells, basically runs bag tanks, a bit like an F40, one either side, but it's only running one tank. So in the hole that left, we've put another battery, so there's another dry cell battery in there, and we've linked them together. So the car runs on 12 volts, but the starting system runs on 24 volts. What that does, well, they were finding it was very hard to start. On a high compression engine, but this has got really high compression ratio and really tall camshafts, so when it was going around slowly, it was effectively going slow, fast, and the pickups for the ECU, which is like a finger that goes, it's like a blade that goes past, it wasn't getting a consistent reading, so the car was very hard to start. So by spinning it faster, it gets a more consistent reading off the flywheel pickup, so hopefully that'll help with starting. looking at the controls of that on this, obviously quick release steering wheel so you can get in and out of the thing. All the rest of this car is original. All the switches and that are lovely. It's all original. We've sort of got it all working again. There's a whole of real rally car stuff. There's just an array of knobs and buttons that work, fans and pumps and cooling fans. So one of the things we've had to do is go through the car, make sure it all works, and then go through with the owner, because it's a long time since he's driven the thing, and actually what all this stuff does. And like I said earlier, one of the original Metro bits is probably the wiper stalk, and that's about it. To try and convey how ferocious this car is, because we're going to go out in it and try and drive it, I don't know how we're going to do this on film. It is astonishing, this car. It will go, it's quite low geared, so it will go through the gear change. You'll hear, when I was driving it, I thought, oh, what's the I've got a misfire, and it hit the rev limiter. It goes through the gears as fast as you can change gear to 9,500 in every gear. It is incredible. The other thing this thing does, and this has been noticed by the journalists that have driven these sort of things, they've got incredible engine braking. It's got a very high compression engine, it's got huge cams. When you take your foot off the accelerator, the car literally like stops almost on its own. So you find yourself arriving at roundabouts too early. It's astonishing that a car can generate that much engine braking. But to somehow get across the experience of this car on a video, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to try, because this is a real Concorde moment. This redefines the word car. It's not practical. It's not. It's very loud. It's very unsociable. It's not the sort of thing you can be in for very long, because it's just very hard to drive. It's extremely hot because of all the engine and stuff going on. But as an experience for car people to go out in and come back smiling is just unbeatable. And it's a real privilege to be one of the few people, because not many people get to go out in these things because they are so rare. So it's been a real privilege to go out in it. So let's fire it up and see if we can get this across to you. Like all race cars, they're not the easiest of things to get in now. So once you're in sort of thing. Oh, this isn't big everywhere. Steering wheel, haven't we? Right, okay. Just a quick review then. So as we said before, it's always good to have a car with a starting process. We like lots of knobs and buttons. You'll see from the previous videos that when these have been standing for a while, we hand prime the oil pump on the back of the engine. So we've already done that. We've taken the belt off, wound it around by hand, just to prime the engine. So then we've got, so what I do is crank it over a bit just to get some oil around it again, and then we push the pumps. That gets some oil around, so now if we hit the pumps, hopefully it'll start. Now, what we've also done on this thing, so now the noise starts to kick in, so I'll have to speak up whilst it's warming up. The mapping on this, we've sort of calmed down the mapping, because the fact it starts like that and runs from cold, it needs to be drivable, this thing, so we've calmed it down a little bit on the mapping, so it starts up cold, it starts up hot, and it'll sit here idly. Okay, so we're all strapped in. It's taken us a while. We've got a bit of engine temperature coming up. We tried to rig up some microphones so you can try and hear what I'm saying. We've got about a quarter of a tank of fuel, which will last about 10 minutes in this. This thing does about 5 to the gallon, really. It's not the most economical thing on the planet, so that should be enough just to get us up and down the road. The other thing this thing's got is a racing paddle clutch, which is sort of either on or off, which isn't the easiest of things to live with, but then when you're going down a rally stage, you only need to be going flat out.
And you can hear the gearbox is very clonky and clanky, but that's just the way it is by design. And this is, you can feel now, just going slowly, it is quite drivable. So we've calmed the mapping down a lot. So it is drivable at 3,000 revs. And you can hear now that we're still only going slowly, but the noise level's already building. So I'm not going to be able to say a lot now. Getting the down change right is a bit tricky. You end up with a lot of double declutching and everything. So to try and give the experience without obviously being sensible on the road on this thing is quite hard. But what an astonishing car. I don't think there's anything that's so ferocious through the gearbox that goes through the rev range so quickly. You can see why these were such successful rally cars.
So for years, Dad's been raving about these cars, going back from his rally days when he was out in the forest. And being very fortunate this afternoon to be able to be behind the wheel, now I can completely appreciate what the fuss is all about. What an unbelievable car. All comes together. The F1 level of technology in this thing is just unbelievable. Brilliant, brilliant machine.
So there you have it, the Metro 6R4, a truly astonishing car. And a bit like the Air Forces things. I mean, this thing's mid-80s. It's sort of over 20, 30 years old, and it's still that good. The cutting edge technology that he deployed then. I must say a huge thank you to John, the owner of this car, allowing us to do all this filming and share it with you. And I hope you've appreciated it. And we'll see you on the next one.